There are moments in life when silence feels louder than any storm, when your prayers seem to evaporate before they ever reach heaven, and your strength runs out long before the answer arrives. But what if the silence you fear is the very space where God is shaping your courage? What if the place you think is empty is actually the ground where faith learns to breathe? This is the world Elijah stepped into, a landscape where drought ruled the land, hope ran thin, and one man discovered what it meant to stand with God even when everything around him was collapsing. Elijah enters the biblical story like a sudden bolt of thunder, declaring to King Ahab that there would be no rain except at his word. With the nation of Israel entangled in idolatry under Ahab and Jezebel, Elijah becomes the voice of God calling a wandering people home. First, God hides him by the brook Cherith, where ravens feed him daily, a quiet miracle sustaining a prophet in isolation. Then, when the brook dries, he is sent to Zarephath, where a starving widow and her son see their flour and oil supernaturally multiplied day after day, revealing that obedience invites provision even in famine. And at Mount Carmel, Elijah stands alone against hundreds of prophets of Baal, calling down fire from heaven in a dramatic confrontation that exposes false gods and turns the people's hearts back to the Lord. Yet Elijah's story does not end in triumph. After the fire falls, after a nation witnesses the power of God, Elijah finds himself fleeing for his life from Jezebel's threat. The courage that once roared now feels like a fading whisper, and the prophet collapses under a broom tree asking God to take his life. But instead of rebuke, God offers presence. He feeds Elijah with bread prepared by an angel, leads him to Mount Horeb, and meets him, not in the wind, not in the earthquake, not in the fire, but in a gentle whisper that restores his soul. It is here Elijah learns that God's power is not only displayed in miracles that shake mountains, but also in whispers that steady trembling hearts. Elijah's journey teaches us that standing for truth will not always feel heroic. Sometimes God calls us to confront darkness, even when our voice shakes. Elijah's boldness before Ahab reminds us that faith is not the absence of fear. It is choosing obedience despite fear. And when God leads us into seasons of obscurity like Elijah by the brook, we learn that hidden places are not punishment but preparation. In isolation, God builds the muscles of trust we will need when the challenge before us looms larger than our strength. This story also shows that God provides in ways we cannot predict. He sent ravens when Elijah needed food, multiplied oil when a household needed hope, and sent fire when a nation needed clarity. We often want God to act the same way twice, but he rarely does. Instead, he moves in ways that reveal his character, faithful, creative, and precise. Elijah's path reveals that God never abandons his people to scarcity. He meets them in their need, even when the supply seems impossible. And perhaps most comforting of all, Elijah's despair reminds us that even the strongest believers can break. Even those who have witnessed miracles can grow weary. But God does not discard the tired or condemn the overwhelmed. He meets Elijah with tenderness, feeding his body, restoring his spirit, and speaking in a whisper that cuts through the noise of fear. In our moments of exhaustion, the presence of the Holy Spirit becomes the quiet place where courage is reborn. Elijah's collapse shows us that weakness is not the end of faith. It is the doorway where God begins to heal what fear has drained. As we look back on Elijah's journey from the drought to the widow's home, from Mount Carmel's fire to the whisper on Horeb, we see a God who sustains, confronts, restores, and empowers. Elijah's story is not simply a tale of prophetic boldness. It is a portrait of God's faithfulness woven through every season of a believer's life. We are reminded that God stands with those who stand for him. He cares for those who feel forgotten, and he speaks most clearly when we quiet the noise around us. In the end, Elijah's life points us to a God who is present in fire and in silence, who strengthens us for battles and comforts us in valleys, who calls us to stand firm yet invites us to rest when we are weary. His story encourages us to trust the God who never leaves, never fails, and never stops speaking, whether through miracles that shake the earth or whispers that heal the soul.